Hello everybody and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, The Lost Planeswalker. And today, I'm going to do a commander deck tech for my Scry deck for my Back to the Basics video I did on Monday. This deck I call Scry and Die. This deck revolves around Elminster, a legendary planeswalker from Battle for Baldur's Gate. But let's look at some basic stuff first. First, this is a commander deck. Everything is legal. The cost, excluding basic lands, is $112. And our salt sum is right around 33%, which is right around the average. Now, let's take a look at Elminster. Elminster, 3 white blue, legendary planeswalker, Elminster. Whenever you scry, the next instant and sorcery spell you cast this turn costs X less to cast, where X is the number of cards you looked at while scrying this way. +2, draw a card, then scry 2. -3, exile the top card of your library. Create a number of 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature tokens with flying equal to the card's mana value. Elminster can be your commander. Elminster starts with a loyalty of 5. Elminster is a really neat scry commander because you can reduce the costs of instant and sorcery spells you cast just by scrying. And his tick up ability immediately has you scry 2, so at least once per turn, you're at least discounting a spell by 2. Now, let's take a look at some of the artifacts I included in this deck. Starting off with our staples, we have Arcane Signet, Commander Sphere, and Soul Ring. These cards are good in every commander deck, so they're included here as well. We have Azorius Signet, which can filter your mana for 1 generic for a white and blue. Next, another awesome card for this deck is Crystal Ball. For 1 mana, you can scry 2, which basically means for 1 mana, you can discount your next spell by 2, and look at the top 2 cards of your library. One of the new cards from the Brothers War is the Temporal Anchor. 3 blue blue blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 2. Whenever you choose to put 1 or more cards on the bottom of your library while scrying, exile that many cards from the bottom of your library. During your turn, you may play cards exiled with the Temporal Anchor. So basically, you can play spells that you scry to the bottom, making it so you can basically hold on to them and cast them whenever is best for you. Next, because you're going to be drawing some cards because we're playing blue, we have Thought Vessel. 2 mana, artifact, you have no maximum hand size, and you can tap it for a generic mana. And then for some color fixing, I threw in Wayfarer's Bauble. 1 mana, artifact. 2, sacrifice Wayfarer's Bauble and search your library for a basic land. Put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Alright, with that, let's start looking at some of these creatures. As you can see, there aren't too many creatures in this deck, 15, because you're going to be creating a lot of tokens with Elminster, but also, I want a lot of instant and sorcery spells to take advantage of his discount. Starting off, we have Archmage Emeritus, which, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, will draw you a card, keeping your hand nice and full. Augur Owl has you scry 3 when it enters the battlefield. Baral, Chief of Compliance, discounts your instant and sorcery spells. And whenever a spell ability you control counters a spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Cryptic Annelid lets you scry 1, then 2, and then 3, discounting your next instant or sorcery spell by 6. Elgeth, Crossroad Augur, is one of the legendary creatures I talked about in my video. He is paired with Sani, Eye of the Storm. This turns your scrying into card draw, so when you tick Elminster up, you're actually drawing 3 cards and plussing them up, which is a pretty sweet ability. Fairy Seer is a really cool card, because for 1 mana, you're scrying 2, making it a really great spell for this deck. Grand Arbiter Augustine IV discounts your blue spells by 1, your white spells by 1, and spells your opponents control cost 1 more, making this awesome card for all of the creatures and instant and sorcery cards in your deck. Hadi Djinn discounts your instant and sorcery spells by 1, and its power is equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. Hullbreaker Horror has Flash. This spell can't be countered. Whenever you cast a spell, choose up to 1. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand. Return non-land permanent to its owner's hand. This is a great card for this deck because we're going to be focusing in on casting instant and sorcery spells, so you'll be able to remove stuff from your opponent's board and force them to recast it. Kangi Sky Warden is another great card for this deck because Elminster's second ability is going to have you creating a bunch of 1/1 fairy dragon creature tokens. Those are going to have flying and are going to get buffed with Kangi. Rumor Gatherer has its alliance ability, which means whenever a creature enters a battlefield, you'll scry 1, and then, if this is the second time it activates, you'll draw a card instead. Saini, Eye of the Storm, has you scrying whenever it attacks, equal to the number of flying creatures also attacking, which this deck is packed full of. Tangan, Otawara Master, is another commander for this deck. Instant sorcery and dragon spells you cast can't be countered by spells or abilities. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, you can exile it and give it rebound, which means you can cast it at the beginning of your next upkeep for free. Trollrand Sky Summoner is going to have us creating 2/2 blue Drake creature tokens for each instant and sorcery spell we cast. And finally, we have Thunderclap Wyvern, which has flash, and other creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. Now, let's move on to some enchantments. There's only a few enchantments I'm going to include in this deck because I think we're going to get a lot more value from the instant and sorceries, which there are the most of. Divine Visitation has you creating 4/4 white angel creature tokens with vigilance instead of whatever token you were going to make. This is going to turn those 1/1 fairy dragon creature tokens into 4/4 angels. Intangible Virtue is going to give all of our creature tokens +1/+1 in vigilance, which is going to be great. Jace's Sanctum makes instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you scry 1. Neithos' Puzzle Wand is a really cool card from Dungeons & Dragons. This one has you, at the beginning of your upkeep, roll a d4, and scry, where X is the reward. Whenever you roll the die's highest amount, you draw a card. This is going to have us scrying a lot and making all of our spells a lot cheaper. And finally, we have Retreat to Coral Helm, which whenever a land enters the battlefield, you can scry 1, or you can tap or untap a target creature. But I think you'll know which one we're choosing. Now, let's look at some of those cool blue instants that we included in this deck. Aetherize is our first card, and it has return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. This is going to be a really cool card because we might not have a lot of creatures at the beginning of the game, and this is going to help us keep our opponents from killing us very quickly. Behold the Multiverse has scry 2 and then draw 2, and you can cast it for its foretell cost. You can pay its foretell cost for 1 and a blue to put it into exile. Then on a later turn, you can pay 2 mana to cast it from exile. Blue Sun Zenith is a really great card in this deck because target player draws X cards and then shuffles Blue Sun Zenith into its owner's library. Basically, you're going to want to discount as much as you can, and then you pay X equal to the amount of mana discounted in the 3 blue, and you're basically casting it for free. This is going to draw you a lot of cards and refill your hand when you need it most. Brainstorm is an all-around great card, and that's why it's in this deck. There isn't any scrying, but you're going to draw 3 cards and then put 2 on top of your library in any order. Counterspell, blue, counter target spell. It doesn't get any simpler than that. This is a great card and should be an include in any blue deck. Deliberate is another great spell. For 1 and a blue, you scry 2, then you draw a card. You're going to be casting a lot of instant and sorcery spells, so Dig Through Time is going to have Delve. Each card you exile from your graveyard while casting this spell pays for 1. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Diviner's Portent is similar to Blue Sun Zenith, where it's X, blue. You will roll a d20 and add the number of cards to your hand. 1 through 14, draw X cards, 15 plus, scry X, then draw 7 cards. If you have a lot of mana, you can dump this in, and hopefully if you get that 15 plus, you'll scry and draw those many cards, and then maybe you'll cast another big spell later that turn. Elminster's Simulacrum. 4 blue. For each opponent, you create a token that's a copy of up to 1 target creature that player controls. This is a really good card and really on theme, especially for Elminster. Emergency Powers is going to have you and all your opponents shuffle their hands into their libraries and draw 7 new cards. If you cast a spell during your main phase, you may put a permanent spell that costs 7 or less from your hand directly onto the battlefield. Heliod's Intervention is also a very cool card for this deck, because you can choose one, destroy X target artifacts and or enchantments, or target player gains twice X life. If you can discount this spell a bunch, and cast it for only 2 white, and let's say 10, because you scryed 10 that turn, you're going to be gaining 20 life or destroying 10 target artifacts or enchantments. Opt, blue, scry 1, then draw a card. This is very similar to Brainstorm, it's just a staple in Commander and all other formats, so that's why it's in here. Next, we have Path to Exile, one of the best white removal spells there are. Exile target creature, its controller may search their library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Perplexing Test, 3 blue, instant. Choose one. Return all creature tokens to their owner's hand. Return all non-token creatures to their owner's hand. This is a great card because we want to create a bunch of creature tokens with Elminster, and we can return all of our opponent's creatures to their hand and swing out and kill them with our creature tokens. Sphinx's Relevation, X, white, blue. Instant. You gain X life and draw X cards. This is one of those cards that hits both boxes very well. If you can discount this a bunch, you can gain a bunch of life and draw cards. A perfect combo. And finally, for our instance, we have Swords to Plowshares, another one of White's best removal spells. Exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. Now, let's look at some of the lands I included in this deck. Again, I wanted to leave the mana base pretty simple, but I could not miss out on some of those lands that have you scry when it enters the battlefield. Starting off, we have Castle Vantress. Castle Vantress enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island. You can tap it for a blue, or tap 2 and blue to tap it to scry 2. Next, we have Command Tower. Add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Next, I included a few more islands than plains because we have more blue spells in this deck than we do white. So I want to make sure we're getting all the blue we need. Prairie Stream enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. Well, this deck's full of them, so it's going to help with our mana fixing. Similar to Thought Vessel, Reliquary Tower makes it so we have no maximum hand size, and it taps for colorless mana. And finally, we have Temple of Enlightenment. Temple of Enlightenment enters the battlefield tapped. When Temple of Enlightenment enters the battlefield, you scry 1, and it taps for a white or a blue. This is all pretty simple, but this is a great simple mana base that can be improved on if you have the extra money to pour into it. Now finally, I did include one Planeswalker, so let's talk about him. Jace Mirror Mage. Legendary Planeswalker Jace. Kicker 2. When Jace Mirror Mage enters the battlefield, if Jace was kicked, create a token that's a copy of Jace Mirror Mage. Except it's not legendary, and his starting loyalty is 1. +1, scry 2. And 0, draw a card, reveal it. Remove a number of loyalty counters equal to that card's converted mana cost from Jace Mirror Mage. If we can cast this for 5, we're going to create 2 Jaces. We're going to be able to take both of them up each turn, meaning the next instant sorcery spell is automatically going to be 4 cheaper to cast. This is a great card, and I'm so glad I found it to include in this deck. Now, let's finish this out by looking at the sorceries I included in this deck. First off, we have Amaratu's Augury, 6 blue. Exile the top 8 cards of your library. You may put a land from among them onto the battlefield until end of turn. For each non-land card type, you may cast a card of that type from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. First off, if we scry enough, this card just costs 2 blue, and then we can play cards for free without having to pay their mana cost. One of the best alternate win strategies in this game is Approach of the Second Sun, 6 mana white. Sorcery. If Approach of the Second Sun was cast from your hand, and you've cast another spell named Approach of the Second Sun this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put Approach of the Second Sun into its owner's library, 7th from the top, and you gain 7 life. With all the scrying we're going to be doing, we're going to be able to put Approach of the Second Sun right on top, draw it, then cast it for 1 white. This is going to be an awesome way to win the game. Clone Legion is a 7 and 2 blue sorcery. For each creature target player controls, create a token that's a copy of that creature. If we're able to scry enough, we're going to be able to create a token of every creature our opponents control for just 2 blue mana. That is amazing. Another amazing token generator is Entreat the Angels, XX white. Create X 4/4 white angel creature tokens. Then it has a miracle cost, which means if you cast this card for its miracle cost, when you draw it, then if this is the first card we've drawn this turn, we can cast it for its miracle cost, which is X white. This is an awesome way to create so many angels that are going to be able to overpower our opponents. And let's just keep going with Final Glory, X white. Create X 2/2 white soldier creature tokens with vigilance. If X is 10 or more, also create X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance. The discounts in your deck are just going to make this card almost free, and if you have to put a couple more mana in it to make 10 2/2 soldiers and 10 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance, go for it. This is going to put you so far ahead. 4C, 3 and a blue. Scry 4, then draw 2 cards. This is going to cost a little bit, but it's going to discount our spell by 4, so it's going to be well worth it. Hour of Reckoning is also going to be a great card to synergize with our tokens we create from Elminster. You destroy all non-token creatures, and you can tap any number of creatures to pay for 1 of this spell's converted mana cost. So, if we don't already pay for it for free, and only 3 white, you can tap your creatures, destroy them, and then swing out with your creature tokens that we made. Interpret the Sign is a really cool card because we're going to cast it for a reduced cost. Scry 3, reveal a top card of our library, then draw the cards equal to its mana value. So hopefully we get something big like Clone Legion, which is a 9 mana card, and draw 9 cards. Or our next 9 mana card is Mnemonic Deluge. Sorcery, exile target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Copy that card 3 times. You may cast the copies without paying their mana cost. Exile Mnemonic Deluge. We have some really big, powerful spells and instants in this deck. If we can copy those and cast them 3 times, we're going to put ourselves way ahead. Mystic Speculation. Blue, and buy back 2. Meaning, you may pay an additional 2 as you play this spell. If you do, put this card into its owner's hand as it resolves. Scry 3. For 1 blue, Scry 3, it's already good, but you can recur this back to your hand to continue to make your spells a lot cheaper over and over again. Preordain. Scry 2, draw a card. This card is banned in some formats for how powerful it is, so it's definitely going in this deck. Similar, but a little different, Serum Visions, draw a card, then Scry 2. The order does matter, because I believe Preordain is banned and Serum Visions isn't. Solve the equation. 2 and a blue. Search your library for an instant or sorcery card. Reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. This card is going to help us get some of those awesome big spells that we want to cast to take over the game. Storm Herd. 8, white, white. Create X, 1/1, white Pegasus creature tokens with flying, where X is your life total. This is one of those insane cards that you normally never get to play in a game. But if you can reduce its cost by a ton, you can play this and create a ton of white Pegasuses to overrun your opponents and beat them all to the punch. Tamiyo's Epiphy, 3 and a blue. Scry 4, then draw 2 cards. Great Scry card, that's why it's in this deck. Time Stretch, 8 blue blue. Target player takes 2 extra turns after this run. This is a great card because not only are we going to be able to discount it and cast it for free, then play 2 additional turns, but it doesn't exile, so if there's some way to get it back into our hand, we can discount it again and play it again. Ugin's Insight, 3 blue blue. Scry X, where X is the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control, then draw 3 cards. Well, if you have Elminster out, it's going to be 5 at a minimum, which is pretty good, making our spells 5 cheaper to cast. Well, that's it. So now, let's take a look at some of the maybe board cards I included. A lot of these either were creature token based or drawing and winning the card based. A lot of these are extra turns that they were just a little too expensive to put in the deck, and also extra turns can get a little bit annoying, so unless you're playing with a group who doesn't mind, you might not want to include them. Spark Double is also an awesome card to include in this deck, but it was just a little expensive, so I left it out. You can create a copy of Elminster and have the original Elminster and just tick them both up and make your spells cost 4 less. There's some really cool stuff you can do with Scry, and it really shows, and I'm really excited, and hopefully some of you will build this deck and play it out. If you do, let me know. Looking at our color distribution, you can definitely see we have a lot more blue pips than we do white pips. So I'm trying to keep them even. Sometimes, you'll be trying to draw that one, and if you have too few islands or plains in your deck, you're going to miss the color you need. So just make sure you keep it even. You can just pay the generic with the color you don't need. Also, looking over at the mana curve here, we can see that this is a rather high mana curve. Usually I try to keep it around 3, but we have so many big expensive spells that we want to cast. That's why it's making that shift go way up. Yeah, and that's it. I mean, I hope this deck works really well. I think it'll work really well. I don't have all these cards, so I'm not going to put this together, but if you do, please leave a comment down below. If there's a card you think should go into this deck, please leave it in the comments below. I'm really interested. This was a really fun deck to build, and I can't wait to do the next one. So, thank you for watching. If you like it, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. This would really help me out. I'm trying to do one of these a week. Yeah, they're a lot of time and work, so I appreciate you if you stay till the end and watched. And yeah, that's it. So, as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.